Today, we're ranking the deadliest attack aircraft of World War II, from outdated flying coffins that barely survived to the brutal monsters that could wipe out entire tank columns and terrorize armies from the sky. 10. Worst. Blackburn Skua. Let's start at the bottom, and I mean the bottom. September 1939, Britain is at war, and the Royal Navy's primary carrier-based attack aircraft is this thing, the Blackburn Skua. It looks like someone designed a fighter plane, got bored halfway through, and decided to just bolt a bomb rack underneath. To be fair to the Skua, it did have a genuinely impressive moment early in the war. It actually sank the German cruiser Königsberg in April 1940, becoming the first warship sunk by air attack in wartime. That's legitimately remarkable. Give credit where it's due. But here's the problem. The Skua was a dive bomber that couldn't survive a dogfight, an attacker that was too slow to escape, and a naval aircraft that was almost immediately obsolete by the time the real war started heating up. By 1941, it had been quietly pulled from frontline combat roles. Even the British, who are famously polite about everything, couldn't find a way to spin this one. It gets ranked 10 not because it was a disaster, but because it was simply overtaken by the war itself before it had any chance to matter. And in this list, relevance counts. 9. Breda Ba.65. Now, most of you probably just said, the what? And that's exactly why it's on this list. The Breda Ba.65 is one of those aircraft that history almost completely forgot. And in a way, that tells you everything. Italy entered the war with this thing as one of its frontline ground attackers. On paper, the concept was sound, a monoplane attack aircraft that could carry bombs and strafed ground positions. Fine, reasonable. The reality? The engine was underpowered for the airframe, which meant it was slow. And in attack aviation, being slow is a death sentence. Pilots flying ground support missions needed to hit hard and get out fast. The Ba.65 could barely do the first and definitely couldn't do the second. It saw action in North Africa and East Africa. And it wasn't completely useless, but by the time Germany and Britain were deploying serious attack aircraft, the Ba.65 was a relic. Italy knew it. They replaced it as fast as they could. What makes it interesting, and what earns it a spot above dead last, is that it was exported to several countries, including Iraq, Hungary, and even used in the Spanish Civil War. It had ambition, it just didn't have the engine to back it up. 8. Henschel Hs 123. Here's where the list gets genuinely interesting, because the HS 123 looks like it belongs in a museum, and it kinda does, but it also kept showing up on the front lines long after everyone expected it to be retired. It's a biplane in 1940, in 1941, still being used effectively in 1943 on the Eastern Front, where conditions were so brutal that pilots were specifically requesting it over more modern aircraft. Why? Because the HS 123 was practically indestructible at low altitude. Its radial engine could be hit repeatedly and keep running. It could operate from improvised airfields, muddy fields, frozen ground, conditions that would cripple more sophisticated aircraft. It was slow, yes, but at low altitude doing close air support, speed matters less than precision and endurance, and the HS 123 had both. German ground commanders on the Eastern Front actually petitioned the Luftwaffe High Command to keep producing it even as more modern Stukas and FW190s were rolling out. That's the highest possible endorsement from the people whose lives depended on it. It's ranked 8 because it's fundamentally limited by its biplane design. It could never carry the payload or reach the speed of dedicated monoplane attackers. But ancient but still deadly in 1943? That's an achievement worth acknowledging. 7. Douglas A-20 Havoc. The A-20 Havoc is the aircraft that every historian respects and almost no casual viewer remembers, and that's genuinely a shame, because this aircraft did serious work across nearly every theater of the war. It served in the U.S. Army Air Forces, the Royal Air Force, the Soviet Air Forces. The Soviets actually loved it, receiving over 3,000 under Lend-Lease, and the Free French. That kind of universal adoption doesn't happen unless an aircraft is genuinely good at its job. What the Havoc had was speed. At a time when attack aircraft were largely slow, lumbering things designed to get low and stay low, the A-20 could move. That speed let it survive environments that would have turned slower attackers into wreckage. It could hit and actually exit the engagement, rather than slowly trudging back home hoping nothing with guns caught up to it. It was versatile too, used as a night fighter, a level bomber, a torpedo bomber in the Pacific. That adaptability is a genuine military asset. The aircraft that can do many things well is often more valuable in a total war than one that does one thing perfectly. It sits at rank 7 because it lacks the specialized ferocity of what's above it. But make no mistake, the Havoc earned its place in this war. 6. Bristol Beaufighter. The Bristol Beaufighter had a reputation. Japanese troops in the Pacific called it Whispering Death. Not because it was quiet, but because it flew so low and so fast that you often didn't hear it until it was already too late. Let that sink in for a moment. An aircraft that earns a nickname from its enemies that references death. That's not marketing, that's earned. The Beaufighter was never designed to be a pure ground attacker. It started as a heavy fighter, but war has a way of reassigning things, and the Beaufighter ended up doing some of the most brutal low-level strike work of the entire conflict. 4 20mm cannons in the nose, rockets under the wings, and later the ability to carry torpedoes for maritime strike missions. It was a weapons platform that could reach out and destroy almost anything below it. In the Mediterranean and Pacific theaters, it was absolutely lethal against shipping. German and Japanese supply lines felt it. In Burma and New Guinea, it hunted ground targets at treetop level with a ferocity that was completely out of proportion to how little fanfare it gets in popular history. It's ranked 6 and not higher because it was genuinely difficult to fly, heavy, demanding, unforgiving of mistakes, and because it was never optimized purely for the ground attack role the way some aircraft above it were. But when it worked like an axe. 5. Most controversial, Junkers Ju-87 Stuka. All right, the comment section is going to have opinions about this one, and that's fine. That's actually the point. The Ju-87 Stuka is probably the most recognizable attack aircraft of the Second World War. That distinctive inverted gull wing, the fixed undercarriage, and most of all, the Jericho trumpet. The sirens mounted on the landing gear that screamed as it dove, turning every attack into a psychological assault as much as a physical one. In 1939 and 1940, the Stuka was terrifying. Poland, France. The opening campaigns of the war where German air superiority meant the Stukas operated in an environment designed for them, with fighter cover against opponents who couldn't effectively fight back. In those conditions, the Stuka's precision dive bombing was extraordinary. It could put a bomb through a specific window if the pilot was good enough. Later in the war, Hans Ulrich Rudel became legendary flying one on the Eastern Front against Soviet tanks, racking up a kill record that's almost impossible to believe. So the airframe clearly had capability in the right hands and the right conditions. But the right conditions is a significant caveat when ranking attack aircraft. The Stuka dominated when the war was easy for Germany. When the war got hard, it suffered. Rank 5 feels right, and I know some of you are already typing disagreements, so go ahead. That's what the comment section is for. 4. Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. The P-47 Thunderbolt weighed nearly 8 tons fully loaded. It was the heaviest single-engine fighter of the war. American pilots who first flew it called it the Jug, short for Juggernaut, because that's exactly what it felt like. And when it transitioned from high-altitude escort fighter to ground attack aircraft in 1944, it became one of the most destructive things in the sky over Western Europe. Here's what made the Thunderbolt exceptional as an attacker. It could absorb punishment that would have destroyed any other aircraft. Radial engine hit? Still flying. Hydraulic shot out? Still flying. Multiple cannon holes in the fuselage? Pilots brought these things home in conditions that should have been unsurvivable. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine was almost comically robust. There are documented cases of Thunderbolts landing with entire cylinders missing. Now, put 10 5-inch rockets and 2 500-pound bombs on that airframe at 8.50 caliber machine guns firing simultaneously, and you have a ground attack aircraft that could destroy a column of vehicles, a rail yard, or a fortified position with almost casual brutality. German ground forces called P-47 attacks among the most feared experiences of the Western Front campaign. When you're on the ground and you hear that R2800 engine, you run. You find a ditch. You pray. 3. Late War Monster. The Hawker Typhoon. The Hawker Typhoon almost didn't survive long enough to become one of the most feared ground attack aircraft of the war. In 1942, the Typhoon was a disaster. The Napier Sabre engine, the most powerful piston engine ever fitted to a British aircraft, was unreliable, prone to failures at critical moments, and killed pilots during operations. The tail structure had a structural weakness that caused catastrophic failures in high-speed dives. The carbon monoxide fumes from a cockpit seal problem were literally poisoning pilots mid-flight. At one point, the RAF seriously considered canceling the entire program. They didn't, and what emerged once those problems were fixed was extraordinary. Armed with 4 20mm cannons and, crucially, 8 60-pound rockets under the wings, the Typhoon became the primary ground attack aircraft of the 2nd Tactical Air Force in the lead-up to and aftermath of D-Day. In the summer of 1944, during the Battle of the Falaise Pocket, Typhoon squadrons effectively destroyed an entire German army. Hundreds of tanks, thousands of vehicles, columns of retreating Wehrmacht forces caught in the open and annihilated from the air. Survivors described the experience of a Typhoon attack as something close to the end of the world, a wall of rockets and cannon fire arriving faster than the sound of the aircraft itself. The early problems keep it at number 3, but in its mature form from 1944 onward, the Typhoon may have been the most destructively effective ground attack aircraft in the Western theater. Full stop. 2. Junkers JA-8. If the Stuka was Germany's icon and the Bf-109 was its sword, the Ju-88 was its Swiss Army knife. And in total war, that kind of adaptability has a value that's genuinely hard to overstate. The Ju-88 started as a fast bomber, then it became a dive bomber, then a torpedo bomber, then a night fighter, then a heavy fighter, then an anti-shipping aircraft. Then, in one of the more bizarre chapters of the war, it became a flying bomb in the Mistral composite aircraft program, where a stripped-down Ju-88 filled with explosives was remotely guided by a fighter aircraft mounted on top of it. That last part is insane and also completely true. What makes the Ju-88 deserve number 2 is the sustained, multi-year operational effectiveness across almost every role the Luftwaffe needed it to fill. It could deliver serious payload, it was fast enough to complicate interception, and it kept being genuinely useful from 1939 all the way through to 1945. Very few aircraft can claim that kind of longevity and an active combat role. The reason it's not number 1 is that the Ju-88 was always doing several things adequately, rather than one thing with devastating mastery. The aircraft above it was designed for a single purpose, executed that purpose with terrifying effectiveness, and did it on a scale that changed battles, campaigns, and arguably the outcome of the war. 1. The greatest, Ilyushin Il-2 Sturmovik. In 1942, when aircraft production was being disrupted by the German advance into Soviet territory, Stalin sent a telegram to the factory directors responsible for the Il-2. It read, and I'm paraphrasing, "The Red Army needs the Il-2 like it needs air and bread. I demand more aircraft. This is my final warning." The Il-2 Sturmovik was unlike any attack aircraft that had come before it. Designed from the ground up to absorb punishment that would destroy any other plane, it had 700 kilograms of armor integrated into the fuselage, not bolted on, but structural. The pilot and engine were encased in a bathtub of steel that could stop rifle-caliber fire and deflect flak. The aircraft was built to survive environments that should have killed it, and then they armed it. 2 23mm cannons capable of punching through tank armor, 8 RS-82 rockets, up to 600 kilograms of bombs. In the single-seat version, it even had a 37mm anti-tank cannon variant that could penetrate the thin roof armor of almost any German tank it encountered. German tank crews called it Der Schwarze Tod, the Black Death. On the Eastern Front, where the war was fundamentally a battle of armor and air power at close range, the Il-2 was the instrument the Soviet Union used to fight back. At Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, Il-2 formations devastated German armored columns. The aircraft didn't win that battle alone, but it was central to the destruction of German offensive capability on the Eastern Front. More than 36,000 were built. No other attack aircraft in history comes close to that production number. And those numbers reflect not a bureaucratic decision, but an operational reality. Everywhere the Il-2 was used in sufficient numbers, it worked. It killed tanks. It destroyed supply lines. It broke up infantry formations. It made the ground beneath it a dangerous place to be wearing a German uniform. Is it elegant? No. Is it sophisticated? By comparison to what the West was building? Not particularly. But it was exactly the right weapon for exactly the right war, built in numbers that made it feel inescapable, and operated with a ferocity born of necessity. The flying tank, the Black Death, the most produced military aircraft in the history of combat aviation, the Il-2 Sturmovik is without question the greatest attack aircraft of the Second World War. Now, there were some honorable mentions, 5 aircraft that were genuinely excellent and deserve more than a footnote. These didn't make the main list because of the ranking constraints, but each one has a story worth knowing. Ilyushin Il-10, IL-2's evolved successor. Faster, more capable, arrived too late to define the war. Henschel Hs 129, Germany's dedicated tank buster. Effective but unreliable engines held it back. Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver, replaced the Dauntless. Unpopular with pilots, effective in combat. Douglas SBD Dauntless, sank more Japanese shipping than any other Allied aircraft. HE-D3A, Japan's primary dive bomber at Pearl Harbor, first aircraft to sink Allied warships. I have a feeling we'll have some disagreements, but that's the point.
If you liked this video, I'm sure you'll like this one too. Subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Our channel is small, so we are replying every comment below. Comment any suggestion for future videos. Thanks for watching.